So let's talk about Skinamarink. Skinamarink, I would say, is the most polarizing film of 2023 so far. I know if you check on IMDb, like I'm looking right now, it says that it came out in 2022. I think that was mainly for its festival circuit, and of course, we all saw it pop up on leaks on TikTok and probably YouTube, stuff like that. I waited to watch it until it officially released. It's a really small film, I believe. A budget of about $15,000. If I were to watch it, I want money to actually go towards the film instead of it being torrented like I saw a lot of people doing. I believe in theaters it had a box office of like 2 million, if I'm not mistaken. Let me look up real quick. Yeah, it currently has a box office of 2 million with a $15,000 budget. So that's kind of ridiculous. It's love it or hate it, it's a success. So Skinamarink 2 might be on the way. Anyway, according to IMDb, Skinamarink synopsis goes as, 2 children wake up in the middle of the night to find their father is missing. All the windows and doors in their home have vanished. I know. Very specific. A lot going on there. And once you watch the movie, you will see that's about all that happens on the surface. A lot of this movie is very vague. It's very dark. By dark, I don't mean in content. It's got some dark content to it too, don't get me wrong. But it's very hard to see. If you watched the last season of Game of Thrones, you remember the big-ass fight that happened in there, and they were hyping it up like it was going to be better than Helm's Deep. Coolest fantasy fight in the history of fantasy fights. And then we all watched it, and we had no idea what was happening. And I remember being in my dorm and us trying to just turn up the brightness of our TV. We still couldn't figure out what was happening. It was a lot like that throughout the majority of this movie. And I know it was intentional for the most part, because I think what Skinamarink is really trying to do is set you up to let your imagination do a lot of the work for the movie. That's a good and a bad thing. The good thing about it is if you find yourself super immersed in the film, every little bit of atmospheric, what's the word I want to use, have you feeling unease, uncomfortable, but it's really hampered down by the pacing of the film. It's an hour and 40 minutes long. It feels like it was about the same length as the new Black Panther movie. It's about 3 hours. It should not have felt that long. The problem being, I think, that not much really happens in it that is blatant. A lot of it is, like I said earlier, left to your imagination. Without giving away too much spoilers, because I want this to be a spoiler-free review, it feels like for half of the demographic that watched this movie, absolutely nothing happens. And then for the other half, it's one of the scariest movies they've ever seen because it allows their imagination to do all of the heavy lifting. I would say I'm kind of in between. I think atmospherically and aesthetically, the movie is great. It really does a great job of giving a feeling of like a pre-digital age. I believe the term that a lot of people are using for it now is analog horror, which I hadn't heard till probably Skinamarink had came out. Another example of what I would assume is kind of analog horror is like I see people talk about the back rooms. I don't know a whole lot about the back rooms either. I think they just announced today that there's supposed to be an A24 movie coming out based off the back rooms. So I think the success of Skinamarink will probably have a lot to do with that. When I think of analog horror in the way that it was described online to me, I think of things like Marble Hornets, how like Slender Man started online. I don't know. Does that make sense? That might not make sense. I'm still not entirely sure what analog horror is. Maybe we'll have to do a video on that where I just look up what analog horror is and we all try to figure it out together. I do think a really cool part of Skinamarink is the feeling of dread that it gives you at times. I know I said the pacing was a bit wonky, but sometimes it works. Without getting too much into spoilers, one of my favorite scenes is there's a specific character in the film that talks at times, and you don't exactly see them. All you do is hear them. And it's the delivery that they give and just the vocal mixing and mastering that they put over it just makes you so uncomfortable. I watched it around like midnight or 1 a.m. with 2 other people, and even then I was just fully engrossed when these scenes were happening. My one problem is I wish these would have happened more. I know maybe I wouldn't have liked it near as much if these were just in abundance throughout the film, but I felt like we could have gotten a couple more scenes like that. And I know that once they show you one of those scenes, you expect them to come throughout the rest, and that's kind of where a lot of the tension comes from in the film. I think the film lost its tension for me about halfway through, maybe like an hour in. 40-minute mark remaining, it was a bit of a drag to go through the rest. Not that I didn't like it, it's just the story is very vague. I'm all for a vague story, that's cool, but when there's not exactly anything happening on camera to give anything away, it's like someone gave you a puzzle, but only like 20 out of 100 pieces and said, here, put this together. I don't know, that doesn't really work for me. Something that really hurt the movie for me too is when I thought that I was kind of piecing together maybe some of the intent behind the conflict in the movie, which, I don't know, maybe I'm stretching too much what was actually given, but each time I thought I had an idea of what they were trying to set up in the world and make a story around without exactly telling you, something would happen that kind of stopped me from thinking how I was thinking. To me, there's not exactly a story. It just kind of feels like it's these kids stuck in this dream world. And maybe that's all it's supposed to be. I think the best thing going for Skinamarink is how unique it is currently, at least to the mainstream. Like I said, I'm pretty big into horror movies, and I'm pretty prevalent online. And I'm not super familiar with analog horror, or at least the term analog horror. So I think this is going to be the introduction for a lot of people into this type of, I don't know, niche sub-genre of not so found footage. And that's going to probably be the best thing about Skinamarink in the next 5-10 years, assuming that something else doesn't come out and maybe blow it out of the water. This will always be the culmination of this genre starting, at least in the mainstream, like I'm saying. Something that actually has a box office number behind it, not a YouTube video. Whereas, like I said, most people would probably look at something maybe like Marble Hornets as the original, something like this. There might be some other film, which I'm referencing a lot. If you don't know about Marble Hornets, go look into that. That's really cool. Anyway, yeah, the best thing about the film is probably its uniqueness. I can say there's not very much film-wise for me to compare it to. So I think when it comes to the longevity of Skinamarink, it's all going to come down to not whether you liked it or not, but whether it was the first of its kind. That's about all I've got for it. Skinamarink, if you like really niche, specific horror movies, give it a watch. I think maybe if I watched it a second time, I could find more of those story threads that they're trying to weave throughout. I don't think I'll watch it a second time. I've got so much other stuff that I want to watch, so I just don't think I'll be doing that. The cinematography, either you love it or hate it. I actually thought it was really cool. It seems like almost the entirety of the film has no establishing shots, and very little of it has a entire person in frame. It's like everything is cut into pieces, but you still know what's going on. So, for example, you might see the corner of a door that you've already seen from a hallway, and you have an idea of, oh, they're walking through this hallway that leads into the living room or leads into the kitchen, but you don't know exactly which character's doing it until you see maybe what pants or shoes they're wearing or what size their feet are, because there's kids and a couple adults. It demands that you pay attention to it. I think that was really unique. I think for a lot of people that doesn't work. I thought it was cool, but with the pacing, it's just being so slow, I got tired of just staring at nothing. But I'm really excited to see what could maybe come from everything post Skinamarink, anything that's after it. I'm all for weird horror movies just tearing through the box office, and especially with a movie making as much money as this one did, from a $15,000 budget to $2 million, and that's where it's at right now as of February 8th. And it's still in theaters. It just hit Shudder. That's where I watched it on. Yeah, so that's about it. Did you like Skinamarink? Have you seen it yet? Will you watch it? Do you think it was super boring? Do you think it was super scary? Did it give you the chilly willies? I think it was good. I think. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, very in the middle. But let me know in the comments. Let me know about some other analog horror I should look into, because I'm not familiar with this subgenre, and it feels like something I would like to take a deep dive into. It looks really interesting. A lot of it's just super low budget, just looks like passion projects, and I love that. That's about all I got for you. Smooches.